Under the early sunlight of an October day, the Willow Creek Valley in Ohio stretches out like an oil painting, with fields of golden wheat interspersed with the red roofs of family farms. Winding dirt roads lead through rows of silver maple trees, their leaves beginning to turn a vibrant red. This was once a place where everyone knew the name of every plot of land, every stream, where each seed sown carried the stories of generations past. But now, Willow Creek is changing. For sale signs are popping up like mushrooms after rain, and the sound of tractors is gradually giving way to the rumble of trucks from big city investors. In the heart of the valley, Maplewood Auction Hall stands tall as a symbol of transformation. The red brick building with its stunning facade has been enhanced by a sleek, modern glass addition, serving as the arena where the fates of hundreds of parcels of land are decided. Just 10 years ago, it was a modest hall where farmers gathered to buy and sell machinery or auction off a few small plots of land. But now, under the guidance of Charles Donovan, Maplewood has evolved into a stage for million-dollar deals where agricultural corporations and real estate developers compete fiercely for prime, fertile land. Charles Donovan, 58 years old, is a name that everyone in Willow Creek knows. With his sharply tailored suit and confident smile, he exudes the aura of someone from big cities like Columbus or Chicago, not this rural area. Charles has turned land auctions into an art form. He knows how to make 320-acre parcels like Silver Maple Farm appealing to investors, strategic location, close to the new highway, abundant groundwater ready for a major project. His pitches resonate in the hall, drowning out the whispers of the old farmers who once toiled on those very fields. But not everyone is swept away by the allure of Maplewood. For many residents of Willow Creek, each lot sold feels like a knife cutting into their hearts. The farms that once fed 3 generations are now being transformed into industrial parks or upscale residential areas. Old covenants, commitments to protect water sources and preserve farmland are forgotten in the thick contracts. Silver Maple Farm, the land set to be auctioned today, is the center of attention. Rumor has it that it has an important underground spring, supplying water to 5 downstream farms. But in the luxurious atmosphere of Maplewood, those details seem to matter little. As the sun climbed high, its light streamed through the large glass panes of the auditorium, illuminating the banner hanging behind the auction podium, "Premium Land for Premium Clients." The murmurs of the crowd began to rise, blending with the sound of Charles Donovan's leather shoes tapping on the glossy wooden floor. Another auction day was about to begin, and no one knew that today, Willow Creek would witness a moment that would change everything. The double doors of Maplewood Auction Hall creaked as a frail figure stepped inside, interrupting the murmurs of the crowd dressed in expensive suits. Henry Caldwell, 76 years old, stood there, his light blue eyes scanning the room that now felt foreign to him. The worn fabric of his jacket and the mud-caked boots from Willow Creek made him stand out like a relic from the past among the polished investors. In his hand was an old leather notebook, its pages filled with meticulous notes about land, water, and the memories of 3 generations of the Caldwell family. Henry wasn't there to bid. He was there for Silver Maple Farm, the 320-acre plot about to be sold, and for a promise he had made long ago. Inside the auditorium, the stage lights illuminated Charles Donovan, who stood confidently at the wooden podium with a smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice rang out smooth like a television host, "today we have a rare opportunity. Silver Maple Farm, 320 acres of prime agricultural land with excellent water rights and a location right next to the new Highway 42. Starting bid, $3 million. The crowd stirred. Signs from corporations like Heartland Investments and Eastern AgriCorp were raised in preparation. Charles scanned the audience, his gaze sharp as a hawk, but then he paused when he spotted Henry, quietly sitting in the back row. Henry wasn't in a hurry. He waited, his weathered hands gripping the notebook tightly. When Charles paused to introduce the land map on the digital screen, Henry slowly stood up. "Excuse me," his voice rang out, not loud but clear, cutting through the stifling atmosphere of the hall. "I need to say a few words about Silver Maple Farm." The crowd turned around, a mix of curiosity and annoyance on their faces. Charles raised an eyebrow, his smile stiffening. "Regarding the southeast portion of the land," Henry continued, "there's a water protection covenant, registered in 1980. It prohibits non-agricultural development to safeguard the stream that supplies water to the 5 downstream farms. Whispers rose like crashing waves. A few investors frowned, quickly flipping through their documents. Charles stepped down a notch, his polished leather shoes clacking sharply on the floor. "Sir," he said, his tone still polite, but as cold as steel, "I'm afraid you're mistaken. We have thoroughly checked every legal detail of this property. There is no such agreement." Henry shook his head, opening his notebook. "I was there when the agreement was signed, along with the Harper family and the county judge. It's in the county records if you care to check." He held up the notebook as if it were a living testament to the truth. Charles laughed, a short, sharp laugh like a knife. "Sir, this is a professional auction, not a farmers' council meeting. If you don't have $3 million to participate, I suggest you keep quiet." A few snickers erupted from the crowd, but Henry stood his ground. His eyes were locked onto Charles, calm yet resolute. "I'm not here to bid, Mr. Donovan. I'm here to make sure the land buyers know the truth. The water from that stream is the lifeblood of this entire valley." Charles crossed his arms, his eyes flashing with irritation. "Thanks for your kind words, but we don't need a lecture on land from someone like you." The phrase "someone like you" hung in the air, heavy with implication. Henry gripped his notebook tightly, feeling as if all of Willow Creek was watching him, but he knew that somewhere out there the truth still had a chance to speak up. The atmosphere in the Maplewood auction hall was heavy, like the calm before a storm, with the stage lights shining down on Charles Donovan, highlighting his sleek grey suit. He stood there on the wooden podium, arms crossed, his piercing gaze sweeping over Henry Caldwell, who remained steadfast in the back row, clutching an old leather notebook tightly in his hands. Henry's warning about the water protection agreement on Silver Maple Farm hung in the air, like a stone thrown into a tranquil pond. The crowd was silent, their curious yet uncomfortable glances directed at the old farmer in his frayed coat. "The truth?" Charles echoed Henry's words, his voice smooth yet sharp as a knife. "You think an old notebook and a few war stories can stop $1 million deal, Mr. Caldwell?" Henry stood firm, his light blue eyes locked onto Charles, calm yet burning with an unexpected fire. He opened the notebook, his bony finger flipping to a page filled with handwritten notes. "This isn't just a story, Mr. Donovan," he said, his voice ringing clear above the murmurs of the crowd. "This is the agreement I helped draft back in 1980, alongside the Harper family and the county judge. It protects the spring in the southeast corner of the property, supplying water to 5 downstream farms, all the way down to the edge of Willow Creek. If you sell this 320 acres without making that clear, you're deceiving everyone in this room." The whispers surged like crashing waves. An investor in the front row hurriedly flicked through his documents, murmuring to his assistant. Another person raised a hand to ask a question, but Charles quickly stepped down from the podium, his leather shoes clacking sharply on the polished wooden floor. He paused in front of Henry, just a few steps away, the smile on his face now openly contemptuous. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear, "this place is for visionaries, for those who build the future, not for worn-out farmers clinging to the past with empty pockets and delusional dreams." The word "worn out" struck like a knife, slicing through the atmosphere, causing a few in the crowd to chuckle softly, while many others simply bowed their heads in silence. Henry clutched the notebook tightly, his lips pressed into a straight line. He didn't respond right away, just scanned the crowd, expensive suits, unfamiliar faces that no longer bore the marks of Willow Creek. "I don't have $1 million, Mr. Donovan," he finally spoke, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made the entire room pause. "But I have something that money can't buy, the truth about this land. That stream isn't just water, it's the lifeblood of the whole valley, of the people who still farm here, of the very farms you're selling off." Charles let out a short, sharp laugh. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms like a stage performer. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to auction off land worth millions, not to listen to a lecture about springs from some outdated old man." He turned to Henry, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Mr. Caldwell, you either leave right now or I'll call security. The choice is yours." He gestured, and 2 men in black blazers stepped forward from the corner of the room. Henry slowly closed the notebook, his gaze fixed on Charles. He stood tall and proud like a silver maple in the field. "You can chase me away, Mr. Donovan," he said, his voice deep yet resonant. "But the truth isn't going anywhere. This land will remember. even if you choose to forget. He turned and walked out the door, leaving behind a silent hall and a forgotten notebook resting on the chair, a reminder that Willow Creek was far from defeated. Under the soft golden light of autumn, Henry Caldwell stood beside the old truck parked outside the empty lot of Maplewood Auction Hall. The sound of the hall's door slamming shut behind him still echoed, carrying the sting of humiliation from Charles Donovan. But Henry didn't hang his head. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his gaze drifting far away toward the sprawling wheat fields of Willow Creek Valley, where he had toiled for decades. His leather notebook, the one that held the truth about the stream on Silver Maple Farm, had been left behind on the hall's bench, but his memories were not forgotten. He pulled an old phone from his jacket pocket, his finger slowly dialing the number. 50 miles away, in the State House in Columbus, Governor Elizabeth Harper sat in her oak-paneled office, flipping through a stack of documents on agricultural policy. At 52, Elizabeth exuded a natural authority, her silver-streaked hair neatly tied up, and the sharp blue eyes she inherited from her father sparkled with intelligence. The phone rang, and when she saw Dad pop up on the screen, she frowned. Henry rarely called at this hour. "Dad, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. On the other end, Henry's voice was deep but steady. "Liz, I just came from Maplewood Auction Hall. They're selling Silver Maple Farm, 320 acres. I tried to talk to them about the water rights agreement, but they kicked me out." Elizabeth stopped writing, her pencil pausing in her hand. She knew the agreement all too well, a legal commitment her father had helped draft to protect the stream that nourished the 5 farms downstream. "Get rid of Dad?" she repeated, her voice dropping, a sign of the anger rising within her. Henry recounted briefly, his tone calm but unable to hide his disappointment. "Charles Donovan says there's no agreement. He called your dad a washed-up farmer. But Liz, that agreement is real. If they sell the land without making it public, the whole valley will pay the price." Elizabeth stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling streets of Columbus. She knew her father never lied about the land. Willow Creek wasn't just home. It was the Harper Caldwell family legacy, where she grew up surrounded by stories of land, water, and responsibility. "Don't worry, Dad," she said, her voice now as strong as steel. "I'll handle it. You just stay put, okay?" Henry sighed on the other end of the line. "I'm fine, Liz. Just worried about the creek." As the call ended, Elizabeth turned back to her desk and pressed the button to call her assistant. "Get the car ready. We're heading to Willow Creek, right now." Outside, the sunlight still gently bathed the valley, but a new wind was blowing in, carrying with it the hope that the truth, though buried, could still rise again. Maplewood Auction Hall was filled with the roar of raised paddles as the bidding for Silver Maple Farm climbed to a staggering $3,500,000. Charles Donovan, standing on the wooden podium, orchestrated the crowd like a master conductor. $3,500,000 from Heartland Investments, he called out, his confident smile sparkling under the stage lights. "Who'll give me $3,600,000? This is your chance to own 320 acres of prime Willow Creek land." The crowd of investors, dressed in sharply tailored suits, buzzed with excitement, oblivious to the doors of the hall quietly swinging open. But then another sound sliced through, the distant yet sharp wail of a police siren from somewhere in the parking lot. Charles paused for just a moment, yet his smooth tone remained intact. "Please, go on, ladies and gentlemen. 3.6 million, am I hearing that right?" But the sirens were now much closer, accompanied by the powerful roar of multiple engines. The crowd began to turn, whispers spreading like ripples. Through the large glass windows of the hall, a convoy emerged in the autumn sunlight. 2 police motorcycles leading the way, their red and blue lights flashing, followed by 3 sleek black SUVs, and in the center, a luxurious sedan bearing the Ohio State seal. Charles frowned, his smile stiffening. "Just a little disturbance out there," he said, trying to regain the atmosphere. "Shall we continue? 3.6 million. But the double doors of the auditorium swung open, and all eyes turned toward them. 2 state police officers, sharply dressed in uniform, stepped in first, their eyes scanning the room with a cool professionalism. Following them was a woman in her 50s, her silver-streaked hair neatly pulled back, wearing a fitted dark blue suit that accentuated her commanding presence. Governor Elizabeth Harper, with piercing blue eyes inherited from her father, entered the Maplewood auction hall like a strong wind sweeping across a wheat field. Behind her were the chief of staff and a state attorney holding a leather briefcase. Finally, Henry Caldwell appeared, walking slowly, his gaze shy yet resolute. A loud whisper rippled through the crowd. "Is that the governor?" someone asked, their voice a mix of astonishment and worry. Charles stepped down from the podium, his leather shoes echoing with each step, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. "Governor Harper," he said, his tone slightly tense, yet still polite. "What an unexpected honor. We're in the middle of an auction, but if the state wants to join in, I'd be more than happy to make room." He let out a short laugh, hoping to lighten the mood, but that smile faded as Elizabeth raised her hand for silence. "Good morning, everyone," Elizabeth spoke up, her voice resonating naturally yet powerfully, commanding the entire auditorium's attention without the need for a microphone. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's a serious issue that needs to be addressed." She stepped into the aisle, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on Charles. "I have been informed that this auction is proceeding without fully disclosing the legal constraints on Silver Maple Farm, specifically the Water Protection Covenant registered in 1980, which prohibits non-agricultural development in the southeast corner to safeguard the stream that supplies water to 5 downstream farms. Charles opened his mouth to respond, but Elizabeth continued, her voice sharper. "I just confirmed with the county office that covenant is real, Mr. Donovan. So why isn't it in your auction documents?" A wave of murmurs erupted, investors hurriedly flipping through papers, some starting to call their lawyers. Charles raised his hand, trying to regain control. "Governor, I assure you everything has been thoroughly checked. If it's an error, it's just a minor misunderstanding. We can sort this out privately." Elizabeth shook her head, her gaze fixed on Charles. "There's no misunderstanding here, Mr. Donovan. Either your team overlooked this agreement, that's carelessness, or you're deliberately hiding it. That's fraud." The word fraud hit like thunder, silencing the entire room. She turned to the crowd. "In the interest of everyone here, I request that we pause this auction until the records can be thoroughly reviewed." She nodded to the officers, who stepped up to the podium, and for the first time, Charles Donovan looked like a man who just lost the biggest hand of his life. Under the dim lights of the office at Willow Creek, Charles Donovan sat alone, the premium leather chair creaking as he leaned back. The echoes of the interrupted auction haunted him. The wail of police sirens, the sharp voice of Governor Elizabeth Harper, and the disappointed gazes from the crowd of investors. Maplewood Auction Hall, once the stage for million-dollar victories, now felt like a crumbling arena in his mind. On the table, Charles' phone lit up continuously, the screen filled with emails from major clients. "We are suspending our partnership until this issue is resolved. We need an explanation regarding this agreement immediately." Each line felt like a knife to the reputation he had built over 2 decades. Charles stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the main street of Willow Creek. The small shops, coffee houses, and for sale signs lit up under the streetlights, reminding him of the changes he had helped bring about. He had once taken pride in transforming this rural area into a destination for corporations, turning wheat fields into million-dollar assets. But now, the name Charles Donovan was no longer synonymous with success. It was tied to the word fraud that Elizabeth Harper had thrown out before the entire hall. He clenched his fists, trying to shake off the rising sense of unease. "I didn't do anything wrong," he muttered, but that voice lacked its usual confidence. He turned back to the table, opened his laptop, and scrolled through the legal report on Silver Maple Farm. His team had assured him that everything was clear, no covenants, no barriers, but deep down a tiny voice echoed, did they really not miss anything? Or had he been too hasty to close this deal? Charles waved his hand as if to chase the thought away. He picked up the phone and called his chief counsel, Tom Grayson, who had left the hall right after the governor's appearance. "Tom, we need a public response," Charles said, his voice urgent. "Say this is a misunderstanding, that we will cooperate with the state to clarify things. And find anything in the county records to shoot down that damn covenant." Tom replied with an unusual caution. "Charles, I did a preliminary check. It seems there's a document from 1980, but it's buried deep in the archives. We didn't mean to overlook it, but if the governor has dug it up, this won't be easy to sweep under the rug." Charles felt the blood rush to his face. Didn't mean to, he snapped. Tom, the whole world thinks I'm a fraud. Fix this right now. He hung up, slamming the phone down on the table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. He sat down, rubbing his temples. The image of Henry Caldwell flashed in his mind, the old farmer with the leather notebook, his gaze unwavering even when he was thrown out. Charles had once mocked him, calling him washed up, but now he couldn't deny the weight of Henry's words. That stream was the lifeblood of the valley. Charles shook his head, trying to push the thought away, but it clung to him like the scent of damp earth after a rain. He looked out the window again, where the streetlight illuminated an old for sale sign. For the first time in years, Charles wondered if he was selling something bigger than just land, something that no contract could ever put a price on. Outside, Willow Creek lay peacefully under a starry sky, but within Charles, a storm was brewing. He knew he had to take action, but the road ahead was as unclear as the fields in the early morning mist. His reputation, his company, everything was hanging in the balance, and for the first time, Charles Donovan felt he was no longer in control of this game. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the office window of Charles Donovan in downtown Willow Creek, casting a glow on the cluttered wooden desk covered in paperwork. Charles sat there, his eyes darkened from a night of almost no sleep, scrolling through emails from investors demanding to withdraw their funds after the disruption at Maplewood Auction Hall. His reputation, once a solid shield, now felt like a paper house in the midst of a storm. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Who is it?" he snapped, his voice hoarse. His assistant, Jenny, peeked in, her expression hesitant. "Sir, Mr. Henry Caldwell is here to see you. He didn't have an appointment, but he said it's urgent." Charles frowned, feeling as if an invisible punch had just landed in his chest. Henry Caldwell, the old farmer he had humiliated, the one he had chased out of the hall, the man who had indirectly turned his world upside down in just one day. "Let him in," Charles said, his voice dry and hoarse, unsure if he was ready to face this or just wanted to put an end to it. The door opened and Henry stepped in, walking slowly but steadily, his worn coat still looking the same as it did yesterday. In his hand was an old leather notebook, the very notebook Charles had once mocked, now returned to him by a hall attendant. Henry stood before the table, his light blue eyes fixed directly on Charles, devoid of any hatred, just an indescribable resolve. "Mr. Caldwell," Charles began, standing up but not extending his hand. "If you're here to discuss the agreement further, I'm afraid that's been handled by my attorney." He tried to keep his voice steady, but a sense of unease lingered beneath the surface. Henry shook his head, placing the notebook down on the table, his movements slow and deliberate, almost ceremonial. "I'm not here to argue, Mr. Donovan," he said, his tone deep and sincere. "I'm here because I believe we both want what's best for Willow Creek, even if we see it differently." Charles raised an eyebrow, surprised by Henry's calm demeanor. He sat down, gesturing for Henry to do the same. "What do you want?" Charles asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. Henry opened his notebook, flipping to a page filled with notes about the stream, crops, and the land. "Silver Maple Farm isn't just 320 acres, he began. "It's part of this valley, the stream in the southeast corner, the way the water flows through the fields, where the soil retains moisture best after the rain. These details aren't in your legal reports or satellite maps, but they're valuable, not just for farmers, but also for your land buyers." Charles crossed his arms, his gaze drifting over the notebook. "Why are you saying that I should sell the land along with your guidebook?" His tone was a bit mocking, but Henry stood his ground. "Not a guidebook," he replied, "but knowledge. The people buying your land, the corporations, the investors, they don't understand how that stream works, or which fields are prone to flooding. If you tell them, not as a limitation but as an advantage, they'll bid higher. They'll see this land not just as real estate, but as a living system." Henry's words pierced through the fog in Charles's mind like a ray of light. He recalled the failed projects in neighboring counties, neighborhoods flooded because no one understood the underground water flow, fields depleted because investors overlooked the dry season. "What are you suggesting I do?" Charles asked, his tone softer this time, more curious. Henry smiled gently, the first smile since he walked in. "Collaborate. You have the market, you have the customers. I and other farmers have knowledge of the land, something money can't buy. If we combine forces, you won't just sell land, you'll sell its true value." Charles looked at the notebook, then at Henry. He had once thought this old man was just an obstacle, a relic clinging to the past. But now, in the autumn sunlight streaming through the window, he saw something different. Not weakness, but the strength of a man who had spent a lifetime understanding this land. Cooperation, Charles repeated, as if weighing the word on his tongue. He stood up, walked to the window, and gazed out at the distant fields of Willow Creek. If I do this, everything will change. The way I do business, the way people see me. Henry nodded, stood up, and picked up the notebook. Change isn't always bad, Mr. Donovan. Sometimes it's the only way to hold on to what truly matters. He walked out the door, leaving Charles with his thoughts swirling. Outside, Willow Creek remained peaceful, but in this room, a seed had just been planted. A seed of reconciliation, of a future where the land is not just a commodity, but a legacy. A week after the fateful meeting in the office, Charles Donovan stood in front of the mirror in his small house in Willow Creek, adjusting his dark green tie, a color he rarely chose, but today it felt just right. Henry Caldwell's words still echoed in his mind. Change isn't always bad. After many sleepless nights and tense calls with the legal team, Charles had made the boldest decision of his career, to hire Henry as the official advisor for his auction house. Not only that, he began to build a new model, a blend of traditional farmers' knowledge with the professionalism of the modern market. He called it the Caldwell-Donovan Protocol, even though Henry just laughed and said, "Don't put my name on it, I don't like the fuss." Today, at the Maplewood Auction Hall, Charles is getting ready to test this model for the first time. The hall has been transformed. Gone is the banner reading "Premium Land for Premium Clients," replaced instead by a large screen displaying a detailed map of Silver Maple Farm. Not just the boundaries and property values, but also the flow of the streams, soil quality, and notes on crops over the decades, all provided by Henry from his leather-bound notebook. Charles steps up to the podium, the spotlight shining down, but this time, he doesn't feel his usual arrogant confidence. Instead, there's a sense of excitement, like a boy preparing to present his idea in front of the whole class. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles began, his voice ringing clear but with a new tone, more sincere, more approachable. "Today, we're not just auctioning off land. We're auctioning a chance to invest in a living system, Silver Maple Farm. 320 acres with a stream protected by a covenant from 1980, a property that holds not just economic value, but also lasting significance for Willow Creek." The crowd murmured, not out of surprise, but out of curiosity. In the front row, Henry sat there, notebook in hand, his gaze discreetly observing. Beside him were a few local farmers who had once mocked Charles, but were now invited as honored guests. Charles pointed at the screen. "This isn't just empty land. In the southeast corner, there's a stream that provides water for 5 downstream farms, a huge advantage for sustainable agriculture. The soil in the west retains moisture well, making it perfect for wheat or corn. We provide a comprehensive environmental report and insights from those who have lived on this land for generations." He paused, locking eyes with the crowd, not just the investors in their expensive suits, but also the farmers in flannel shirts, the ones he had once overlooked. Starting price $3 million. But today, you're not just buying land, you're buying the truth about it. The auction began and the atmosphere was completely different from usual. A representative from Green Future Co., a sustainable agriculture company, raised the first sign. $3.1 million. An unexpected bidder, old man Jim Tanner from the farm 5 miles away, suddenly raised his hand. $3.2 million. Charles was taken aback, but he didn't stop. $3.2 million from Mr. Tanner, who give me 3.3. Green Future quickly responded, pushing the price up to 3.5 million. The crowd buzzed with excitement, not just because of the numbers, but because both worlds, farmers and investors, were coming together, something that had never happened in Maplewood before. When the price hit $4 million, Charles felt a jolt of electricity run through him. He glanced at Henry, who gave a slight nod, as if to say, "I told you so." After 30 minutes of tense anticipation, the gavel came down at $4.2 million, sold to Green Future, with a commitment to uphold the water rights agreement and promote sustainable agriculture. The applause erupted, not just from the investors, but also from the farmers, a sound Charles had never heard throughout his career. He stepped down from the podium, his leather shoes clacking, but this time it wasn't to show off, it was to shake Henry's hand. "You did it," Henry said, his voice deep yet warm. Charles smiled softly, for the first time not as an auctioneer, but as someone who had just discovered something much bigger. No, we did it. I didn't expect them to bid higher because of that agreement. Henry nodded, flipping open the notebook. They're not buying limitations, Mr. Donovan. They're buying value, something this land has always held. It's just that no one has told them yet. Charles looked around the hall, where farmers and investors were starting to chat and exchange business cards. He realized this was not just a land sale. It was a new beginning. The Caldwell Donovan protocol, he murmured, for the first time feeling that the name was not just an idea, but a vibrant reality. He turned to Henry. Will you continue to help me? I can't do this alone. Henry smiled, the kind of smile that comes from someone who has seen land treated with respect. I'm here for Willow Creek, Mr. Donovan. If you are too, we'll be just fine. Outside, the autumn sun shines down on the fields of Silver Maple Farm, where the stream still flows gently, now protected not just by a promise, but by a new perspective on the land. A perspective that Charles Donovan, for the first time in his life, feels proud to be a part of. Just a few days after the successful trial auction at Maplewood Auction Hall, Charles Donovan sat in the company's conference room, the light from the large window spilling onto the long wooden table cluttered with papers and cold coffee cups. The success of the Caldwell Donovan protocol, selling Silver Maple Farm for $4,200,000, and the applause from both farmers and investors still echoed within him. But that joy was short-lived. In front of him were four key figures: Tom Grayson, the chief attorney, Linda Hayes, the chief financial officer, and two longtime investors, Richard Powell and Ellen Carter, representing the major clients who had helped Charles build his auction empire. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, like the sky over Willow Creek before a storm. Richard, a tall man with silver hair and a deep, thunderous voice, spoke up first. Charles, I saw your option in the paper. $4.2 million. Sounds great, but what's this protocol thing? Are you turning this company into a charity for farmers? He tapped his fingers on the table, his gaze sharp. Ellen, smaller in stature but equally fierce, chimed in. We liked how you used to do things. Quick, clean, no nonsense. Now you're adding all these reports on springs and land, dragging things out, complicating everything. If we wanted sustainable investment, we'd hire an environmental firm, not an auction house. Charles clenched his fists under the table, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. Richard, Ellen, I understand where you're coming from, but the recent auction proved that this new approach works. Green Future bid $4.2 million because they see the long-term value, not just in the land, but also in the water resources and arable land. We're not losing money, we're making more. Linda, the CFO, interjected, her voice as dry as the report she held in her hands. Charles, it's true we're making money from Silver Maple, but Richard and Ellen represent 60% of our old clients. They emailed yesterday threatening to pull their investments if you continue with this model. We could lose millions in upcoming contracts. Tom Grayson, always the cautious one, nodded in agreement. And there's the legal issue too. After Governor Harper's appearance, our former clients are worried about our reputation. They don't want to do business with a company labeled careless, or worse, fraudulent. Charles, you need to consider, go back to the old ways, or risk losing everything. Charles felt a dryness in his throat. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the main street of Willow Creek, where the for sale signs stood silently in the pale sunlight. He had once thought he had found a new path, but now it felt like a noose tightening around his neck. Richard stood up, his voice firmer. Charles, we're giving you a week to decide. Either drop this protocol and go back to the quick and efficient way we used to do things, or we're pulling our funding. This isn't a threat, it's a reality. Ellen nodded, her gaze icy. We're not here to save the valley, Charles. We're here to make money. They left the meeting room, leaving Charles with Linda and Tom. Linda shook her head. Charles, I know you believe in this, but we can't survive on ideals. The company needs cash flow. Tom added, his voice quieter. And if you keep this up, the legal team will have to work twice as hard to handle the old contracts. We don't have the resources. Charles sat down, rubbing his temples. The image of the trial auction flashed in his mind, the sound of applause, Henry's smile, the feeling that he had done something bigger than himself. But now, reality weighed heavily on his shoulders like a stone. He remembered Henry's words, change isn't always bad. But this change could cost him everything, the company, his reputation, and even the trust of those who believed in him. He looked out the window, where an old truck passed by, reminding him of Henry and the vehicle he used to drive. Do I really understand the value of Willow Creek? Charles wondered, but there was no answer. As Linda and Tom left, Charles sat alone, the light in the room gradually fading as the sun dipped below the distant fields. He knew he was at a crossroads. To return to the old path, safe yet empty, or to continue down the new road, fraught with risks but full of meaning. That decision wasn't easy, and for the first time, Charles Donovan felt he was not just bidding on land, but also bidding on his very soul. Under the grey sky of a late autumn afternoon, Charles Donovan drove his sedan along the winding dirt roads of Willow Creek Valley, Highway 42 fading in the rearview mirror. He wasn't headed to the Maplewood auction hall or the office in town. Instead, he was making his way to Henry Caldwell's farm, 10 miles away, where the wheat fields had turned a pale gold in anticipation of winter. The meeting with the old investors, Richard Powell and Ellen Carter, weighed heavily on his mind, along with the looming threat of capital withdrawal and pressure from Linda Hayes about the cash flow. But today, Charles wasn't looking for answers in numbers or contracts. He wanted to see what Henry had been talking about, the true value of the land. When Charles stopped the car in front of Henry's old wooden house, he saw the elderly farmer standing by a fence, his gnarled hands gripping a hoe as he worked on a patch of sunken soil. Henry looked up, his pale blue eyes quietly watching Charles step out of the car, dressed casually in a simple shirt and scuffed shoes. "Mr. Donovan," Henry said, his voice deep but not surprised. "I didn't expect you to come here." Charles took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and dry grass filling his lungs. "I need to see it for myself, Mr. Caldwell, the thing you call the lifeblood of the valley. I'm at a crossroads, and I'm not sure I've made the right choice yet." Henry nodded, set down the hoe and led Charles across the field behind the house. They stopped by a small stream, the water trickling over moss-covered stones. "This is a branch of the stream from Silver Maple," Henry explained. "It flows through here, keeping the soil moist for my farm and 3 others. Last week, Green Future came to check it out. They said thanks to the agreement, they'll plant organic corn here instead of building an industrial park. 1 more farm saved." Charles looked at the water, imagining it flowing through the 320 acres he had just sold, and for the first time he felt it was not just a legal detail, but a lifeline. He turned to Henry. "Richard and Ellen want me to drop our protocol. They say it slows everything down, threatens to pull millions. Linda says the company can't survive if we lose them." Henry listened quietly, then asked, "So what do you think, Mr. Donovan? Do you want to save the company or save something bigger?" Charles fell silent, his gaze fixed on the stream. He remembered the trial auction, the applause, Henry's trusting eyes, the feeling that he was more than just a land seller. "I think I want both," he finally said. "But if I have to choose, I don't want to sell Willow Creek short anymore." That decision led Charles to a press conference the next morning at Maplewood Auction Hall. In front of a crowd of reporters, farmers, and a few curious investors, Charles stood at the podium without a tie, his voice ringing out strong yet sincere. "Last week, I sold Silver Maple Farm for $4,200,000, not just for the land, but for its true value, the stream, the soil, and the sustainability it offers. I used to think auctions were all about speed and profit, but I was wrong." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, landing on Henry standing behind him, a leather notebook in hand. "We developed the Caldwell-Donovan protocol to do the right thing," Charles continued. "Some of the old investors don't like this. They're threatening to pull their funding and I could lose millions of dollars. But today, I declare, my company will prioritize sustainable management, even if it comes with financial risks. Because Willow Creek is not just land, it's home, it's heritage. It's what we leave behind for our children." A murmur spread through the crowd. A few reporters scribbled notes quickly, and some farmers clapped hesitantly. Charles looked straight into the camera. "Anyone who wants to do business with us, come share this vision. For those who don't, I wish them luck." As he stepped down from the podium, Henry approached, his eyes sparkling with pride. "You just did something great, Mr. Donovan." Charles smiled, feeling a sense of relief for the first time in many days. "I learned from you, Mr. Caldwell, and I'll need you to keep going." Outside, Willow Creek quietly welcomed a new day, but in this hall, Charles Donovan had chosen a path that would not only save the land, but also save himself. 5 years have passed since the fateful press conference at Maplewood Auction Hall, and Willow Creek Valley now has a fresh, new look. Under the bright sunshine of a spring day, the wheat fields on Silver Maple Farm sway in the breeze, interspersed with lush green rows of organic corn, the result of Green Future's commitment following that historic auction. But today, it's not just the fields telling a story. On the once controversial 320-acre plot, the Willow Creek Agricultural Heritage Center stands tall, a modern wooden building blending rustic charm with sleek design, featuring a red-tiled roof and large windows reflecting the blue sky. Outside, a sign is engraved with the words, "Dedicated to the land stewards." The Caldwell Donovan Protocol. Charles Donovan, now 63 years old, stood before the crowd gathered to inaugurate the center. His hair streaked with gray, but his eyes sparkled with a newfound pride. He wore a simple flannel shirt instead of a suit, a change he never imagined he would make just a few years ago. Beside him was Henry Caldwell, 81 years old, his gnarled hands resting on a cane, but the smile on his face was as warm as the day they first shook hands. Surrounding them were hundreds of people, farmers in denim jackets, investors from Columbus and Cleveland in tailored suits, and local government representatives, all gathered to witness a milestone that no one thought could ever happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles began, his voice resonating through the microphone, strong yet sincere. "5 years ago, I stood here in the Maplewood auction hall and said that we would do the right thing for Willow Creek. I lost some major clients, a few $1 million, and countless sleepless nights, but today, I can say that was the best decision I've ever made." The applause erupted, not sporadic like in the old auction days, but steady and warm. Charles glanced over at Henry, who gave a slight nod, his eyes sparkling. He continued, "The Caldwell Donovan Protocol isn't just a way to sell land, it's how we protect and honor it. This center, built on Silver Maple Farm, is a testament to that. It will be a place where farmers and investors learn from each other, where traditional knowledge meets modern innovation." He pointed to the building, where inside, maps of the streams, soil samples, and even Henry's leather notebook, now the centerpiece of the exhibit, were displayed. "We've sold over 2,000 acres in the past 5 years at higher values because you're not just buying land, you're investing in sustainability and the future." Elizabeth Harper, still the governor of Ohio, stepped up to the podium after Charles, her deep blue suit standing out in the sunlight. "Willow Creek has become a national model," she said, her voice filled with pride. "This protocol has not only saved the land here, but has also inspired other states. I'm proud of my father, Henry Caldwell, and Charles Donovan for showing us that collaboration can change everything." She looked down at Henry, her light blue eyes shining with family affection, and the crowd erupted in applause once more, this time even louder. As the ribbon-cutting ceremony came to a close, Charles and Henry stood by the stream that flowed through the center, now permanently protected by a fund sponsored by Green Future. "You did it, Mr. Caldwell," Charles said, his voice dropping. Henry shook his head, smiling. "No, Mr. Donovan, we did it, and this valley will remember forever." They shook hands, not as rivals or partners, but as two friends who had built a legacy together. Around them, farmers chatted with investors, children ran through the fields, and laughter echoed among the corn rows. A vibrant, sustainable, and united Willow Creek like never before. 25 years after the inauguration of the Willow Creek Agricultural Heritage Center, this valley remains lush, but now it possesses a more serene beauty. Under the fading afternoon sun, the Henry Caldwell Memorial Park was dedicated on the very land of Silver Maple Farm, once the epicenter of conflict. Fields of corn and wheat now intermingle with stone-paved walkways, wooden benches, and a small fountain where a stream flows from the southeast corner, permanently protected by a state law that Elizabeth Harper passed before leaving her term as governor. The crowd gathered today isn't as large as it once was, but it's still enough to warm the space. The descendants of farmers, investors who participated in the Caldwell Donovan Protocol, and young people from all over Ohio eager to learn. Charles Donovan, now 90 years old, sits in a wheelchair, his thinning white hair fluttering in the breeze. Next to him is Elizabeth Harper, 77, her petite frame having shrunk with the years, but her light blue eyes still shine as brightly as the day she faced Charles in the Maplewood auction hall. They look at each other, not saying much, but their gaze holds a deep understanding, a journey from rivals to allies, from conflict to reconciliation. Charles gently holds Elizabeth's hand, his voice weak but clear. "He would be so proud, Liz." Henry saw it all coming. Elizabeth smiles and nods. My father and you changed Willow Creek, Charles. Not just the land, but the people here too. On the podium, a bronze plaque was erected, inscribed with the words, Henry Caldwell Memorial Park, the guardian of the valley's lifeblood. Below it was a note about the Caldwell-Donovan Protocol, a model that has spread across the United States and into Canada, changing the way agricultural land is valued and managed. Charles gazed at the plaque, reminiscing about the early days, the humiliation, the doubt, and then the collaboration that saved not just Silver Maple Farm, but thousands of acres beyond. I used to think I was just selling land, he whispered to Elizabeth, but it turns out I was helping to preserve it. As the ceremony came to a close, Charles and Elizabeth sat quietly by the stream, the gentle sound of the water flowing, a reminder of what they had accomplished. Their legacy wasn't just the park or the center, but a vibrant Willow Creek, where farmers and investors were no longer enemies, but partners. Charles closed his eyes, feeling the cool breeze, and for the first time in his life, he truly felt at peace. The dedication ceremony for the Henry Caldwell Memorial Park came to a close as the sun set behind the fields of Willow Creek Valley, painting the sky a brilliant orange. The crowd gradually dispersed, but a small group remained by the podium, where Michael Caldwell, Henry's grandson, stepped up with the confident demeanor of a 35-year-old man. He had his grandfather's light blue eyes and the calmness of Elizabeth Harper, his aunt who once served as governor. Michael was neither a farmer nor an auctioneer. He was an environmentalist who had grown up hearing stories about his grandfather and Charles Donovan, a tale he now recounted with an inspiring voice. My grandfather, Henry Caldwell, Michael began, his voice resonating through the microphone, strong yet warm, taught me that land is not just something we own, it's something we borrow from nature and our community and then pass on to the next generation. 25 years ago, my grandfather and Charles Donovan stood right here on Silver Maple Farm, turning conflict into cooperation. They proved that the true value of land isn't in its sale price, but in the relationships between people, nature, and each other. The crowd fell silent, listening intently. Michael pointed to the stream flowing through the park, the water sparkling in the sunset. This stream was almost buried under concrete, but thanks to my grandfather, thanks to Charles, thanks to the Caldwell-Donovan Protocol, it still flows, not just here, but across thousands of acres throughout the country. They've shown us that even rivals can become allies for a greater cause. The applause erupted, not loud but profound, like a heartfelt tribute. Charles, sitting in his wheelchair beside Elizabeth, felt a sting in his eyes. He leaned in and whispered to her, "He speaks even better than I did back in the day." Elizabeth chuckled softly, placing her hand on his shoulder. "He learned from my father, and you, Charles." Michael continued, his voice rising higher. "Today we're not just dedicating a park, we're dedicating a promise that Willow Creek and every valley like it will not be forgotten. The land is our heart, and that heart needs to be protected." As Michael finished, Charles was pushed onto the stage, his hands trembling as he received the old leather book from him. He opened it, the pages now yellowed, and placed it into a glass box in the park, a symbol of reconciliation and new beginnings. "This belongs to Henry," he said, his voice weak but clear, "and now it belongs to all of us." The crowd applauded one last time, and Charles sat down, watching Michael embrace Elizabeth, a family united by land and love. In the final scene, the sunset casts a warm glow over Willow Creek Valley, with fields stretching out, a sparkling stream, and the sound of children's laughter echoing from the park. The camera slowly pans over the red rooftops, where for sale signs have become fewer, replaced by small vegetable gardens and family farms. Michael's voice rings out one last time, like a heartfelt reminder, land is not just property, it is our story. The screen fades to black, leaving behind a united Willow Creek, a legacy that lives on, and a message that change, though challenging, is always worth it when it's for something better. Thank you for joining us on the inspiring journey of Willow Creek Valley, from conflict to reconciliation, from forgotten land to lasting heritage. The story of Henry Caldwell and Charles Donovan reminds us that true value lies not in money, but in the connection between people and nature. If you enjoyed this story, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the Legendary Narratives channel so you won't miss out on other inspiring tales. We truly appreciate your support. Every like and every viewer motivates us to share more memorable stories. We'll see you in the next video on Legendary Narratives, where legends are written from the heart. wishing you a wonderful day.